Second generation rodenticides are under attack, not only in the U.S., but worldwide.
Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek podcast.
Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business. Hey, welcome back to another edition of the Pest Geek podcast. I am your host, Frank Hernandez. I'm just having a marvelous time. I don't know about you, but we're getting swamped over here. I don't know what's going on. I think it's the weather. I think it's El Nino that is causing a lot of havoc all over the place, and pests are just going insane, and we're getting tons of calls. But I wanted to talk to you this week. I got a letter last week from a listener of the podcast who put me up to date on what's going on with rodenticides in California, and sent me a letter of what's also happening in Britain. And Britain is having a very, very serious time with mostly second generation rodenticides. And it's just to the point where they've gotten really strict with it, and California seems to be going that same route. And a lot of things are going on. So we thought we'd cover that on this edition of the Pest Geek podcast. Let you know what's going on in overseas, because to keep your eye on Europe and keep your eye on California. Whatever Europe does, we seem to be following suit in a lot of areas, especially in California, with issues of just the environment overall. So keep an eye on that, and I'm going to keep you abreast of what's going on. I got tons of links for you to look at the information, very good information that I was able to dig up on this issue, and we're putting on the podcast so you can follow up on that. But before I do, I want to give some thanks, some shout outs to some people who are listening to the podcast over Twitter and Facebook, and they're liking us. I'd like to thank Jeremy H. Miller of Advanced Services, Pest Control Associate Certified Entomologist, Certified Trainer, and Certified HPC and WDU Operator in Georgia and South Carolina. So thank you. Thank you for listening to the podcast, for liking us, and for following us on Facebook and also on Twitter, Baxter Pest Management. Baxter Pest Management servicing New York City's 5 boroughs and Lower Westchester. Hey, thanks for following us on Twitter. Really appreciate that. I wanted to talk to you about also a great new little tool that I got, which is actually a pest control tool called the Desect Station. It's from Rockwell Labs, and I love this station. I use the B&G stations for outside, for bait stations, and I use them for outside, and I try to use them inside, but they're really bulky. They're kind of big for inside. So I was looking for a better solution. I've been trying to use little stations, the little bait plates, but they're too small if you're having to deal with a large cockroach issue that you want to prevent and put out product. And there's just a lot of places where you don't have, you can't hide the bait. You don't have a void to be able to put it in. You don't have, behind the wall. You don't want to really just throw it behind a piece of equipment if they're going to be moving that. If it's permanent, then you can just put it behind there. But you got some label restrictions on products that tell you can't put it in the open. You got to, even though it's a bait, you still got to put it in a void, a crack and crevice or something like that. And this Desect Station is awesome because it can be used as a monitor, and it also has inside little bait plate with about 3 to 4 compartments where you can put a large cockroach bait, you can put a liquid bait, and then you can put maybe a granular ant bait, and then still put a roach bait for small roaches. And then you're able to hide it like behind a refrigerator somewhere and put that station back there so there's no loose product. And you just have to move the stove or the fridge when you want to do it, but it's back there and it's not loose. It even has a place for little screws so you can attach it somewhere. Great station by Rockwell Labs. So check it out. I got a link to that in the podcast show notes, and you can check out that station. I wanted to share with you a great book that I think if you're getting into, you want to get into telemarketing. and you want to get into selling on the phone, it is a marvelous book. I mean, it's probably the best I've ever listened to. It's called Smart Selling on the Phone and Online. And the great thing about this, you can get it on audiobook. I also got a link to a free PDF book for it. So if you want to just download the PDF book, you can. And it's about, I think 200 and something pages, 273 pages. But it's a great book if you're looking to get started, if you've never done teleselling, you've never sold on the phone, you've never done cold calling, you've never tried to get appointments to go see a customer on the phone, it is a great, great, great read for you. It's got a ton of tips. Even I listened to it and I was like, man, I've been selling for a long time, and I never considered that. And there are things that with these books that you pick up a lot of tips. This one is loaded with step-by-step instruction. It's one of those great books, even for people who have been selling on the phone. Things you don't consider, you're dealing with. It's just a great book. So check it out. You can get your free copy of this book on audiobook by using our link, audibletrial.com/pestgeek. And you can get a free listen of that book and get a free month on us just by using that link. So take advantage of it. In the news, I wanted to, I looked at a great article by usgbc.org about green buildings and what are the green building trends. And it seems like the demand is going up, even though the social consciousness of why we should do green buildings has gone down. And part of the reason is between 2008 and 2015, the client demand has actually gone up from 34% to 40%. So about 6% customer demand. But why? Well, we look at the environmental regulations have gone up from 26%, 25% in 2008, all the way to 35%. So environmental regulations are creating a demand for green buildings. Market demand has actually been going down. So people are not wanting it as much, but because of those regulations, they're having to comply. And then lastly, just simply because doing the right thing has really gone down. It was in 2008, 42%, well, we should do green buildings. Well, when you start looking at the reality and the cost and all the compliance to do a LEED building and LEED building certification, you realize this stuff is expensive to do. So that's where usually the rubber meets the road, is everybody wants green, everybody wants to do something. But when you look at the cost or the limitations of getting done what you want, then you start to become disillusioned. You all of a sudden have this great idealism, but the reality of getting something done quickly, gets you back down to earth, as I say. And doing the right thing, 25% in 2015 versus 42%. Just wanted to do green buildings because of that. So I got a great link to it. Check out the article. It's a brilliant article. I mean, I love it. If you're looking at a new client base, like doing green buildings and LEED buildings, and developing IPM programs for those types of buildings, I think it's a great market. We're going after that because I think it is a great market. It's a great opportunity. It's very limited, but it is an awesome opportunity. So, check it out and check out the link and tell me what you think. Give me some feedback on that. What you're thinking about that. Also, I wanted to answer a phone question that was called in to us by a listener of the show, and thank you for the calls. Thank you for contributing to the podcast, and the question is really good. Check it out.
Hey Frank, always watch your listen to your podcast. I think it's pretty cool. My name is Lyle. I work for a pest control company in Northern California. I've been in the business 20 years. Used to 15 of it in Arizona, Phoenix to be exact. And my question to you is, what is your intake on, like on initial service, treat all initial service with Termidor? And then if you got them on a bi-monthly service, I know coming back with some of the neonicotinoids or pyrethroids is going to contaminate the fipronil, so to speak. So what would be your intake on coming back doing a bi-monthly service on an account if you treated the initial with Termidor? or would you recommend Termidor just as maybe a spot treatment for ants and things of that nature? Thanks, Frank. Bye.
Hey, Lyle, thanks for the question. That is a very, very good and thoughtful question. Number one is the whole issue of treating with Termidor on initial service. I do not have a Termidor application unless I can absolutely justify using it. And that's pretty much across our entire process. So from an initial service perspective, we have things that we do that are standard, like Cymexa dusting, void treatments. It's standard because that's a long-term preventive strategy that we're going after. The sealing, it's standard. But with Termidor, normally we're dealing with a target insect that is the main problem when somebody calls us. So it's not just, we rarely get a call from anybody that says, I'm not having any problem, I just want to get started on a service to protect my house. Normally, it's a big problem that they're having, and we have to use a targeted solution. So to do an initial service with Termidor, for no particular reason, it's unjustifiable. And here's why. What you got to understand about Termidor is that Termidor has a twice-a-year restriction application on it. Now you can use a lower dosage and apply it 3 times or 4 times a year. But the problem is that Termidor for ant control and other insects works best when there's an actual infestation there or a problem or a trail, an ant trail. If you don't have an ant trail and you just apply Termidor, you're not going to get 6 months of control with Termidor. The restriction is every 6 months or twice a year. That doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to get 6 months worth of control. Okay, too many things are going to happen in that pheromone trail. That the nice thing about using neonicotinoids or non-repellents for insect control is it doesn't destroy the pheromone trail, so it allows them to take it back to where they are and kill that nest. But the problem is, what is the target insect? For instance, if you are in California and you're struggling with Argentine ant, okay, a lot of studies have been done. And Termidor by itself did not produce any better control for Argentine ants than using Talstar or bifenthrin. It produced about the same amount of control for about 8 weeks, about 70-something%. I've got a lot of studies on that, so you can check it out. I got a Fipronil Fate report, an NCBI.gov report, and also a DOI report on there. So you can check out those links. But what I would do is you got to know what your target pest is. For instance, I just got a call that we did over the weekend from somebody that's been in a home since 2012. We're now in 2016. It's 4 years later. They have had a big-headed ant problem, which they didn't know what it was. And their association, they're in an HOA, and they spray the front and the back, okay? And they do it about every 3 to 4 months. They've been spraying it. They've been spraying it before she moved in. They've been spraying it now. They still have that ant problem. They're never going to get control. Because the best way to get control with a type of ant like a big-headed ant problem is to go with bait. You can get over-the-counter Amdro, and you can get control of big-headed ant with Amdro. There's a couple of studies on that. It showed actually in Hawaii 100% control in agriculture with dealing with, they also had to deal with, by the way, dealing with that, if you have an insect like a scale, aphid, mealybug, you got to get rid of that sugar problem so that it doesn't compete with your baits. It doesn't compete with your products. And then you get a targeted control. So no, I would not use Fipronil on an initial service just because I'm doing an initial service and I'm assuming that it's going to get me control. First of all, the data is all over the board on what's the half-life of that product, depending on the soil, pH, water, hydrolysis, photosynthesis, photodegradation, I'm sorry. So it's all over the board from anywhere from, 38 days on the half-life all the way to, half a year on the half-life, depending on. So you don't know how long that product. If you go over it with another neonic, chances are you won't destroy it because now you have 2 products that are non-repellent. But if you go over it then with a pyrethroid, then it's useless because you just destroyed whatever you did before. The question is, are you still going to have protection? So if you have an ant trail when you go and you do the service, and all of a sudden you spray it, then you go to follow up again to find out if it actually controlled it. If you show up in 2 months and you have the same ant trail with the same insect, guess what that's telling you? You're not getting control. So if you're not getting control, why do it? And that's my point, because my point is always, it's not about chemical, it's about control. So, I would definitely look at what your insect that you're targeting is, which is your biggest nightmare, and then deal with it in a way that's going to kill that problem. Because if I do an initial service and I know the life cycle and I know the nesting and I know whether, if it's going to be a pest that's going to be just moving or it's going to be underground and, the product is not going to get past, 10 centimeters and that nest is a foot underground, then what good is it? So I would definitely develop a strategy based on the pest for an initial service. What is it going to take to really control that problem first? And then come back and then do your perimeter treatment with whatever preventive strategy you're going to have for just an initial. Now, I stopped a year ago, actually. We used to do perimeter treatment exterior only. And now we have stopped a year ago, and we've been on an actual year of proving that we're controlling it with exterior baits only. So we're using 3 baits. We're using Invict Express, we're using Entice 10, and we're using Max Force Complete. And we're rotating it depending on when we show up to the property, what insects are we seeing. So if I have a crazy ant, well, I'm gonna go with Max Force on that treatment because I'm gonna get better control of that ant. So if I got another ant, like a big-headed ant, I might use Max Force Complete. If I find no insects and I'm not finding a problem, and then I'm going to go with my boric acid bait and treating that. Because even in the rain, I still get, it's not going to get damaged by the water in heavy rains. And then I'm targeting. So I'm finding out from the client and I'm looking at my inspection. When I do the inspection of that property, what am I dealing with? And what I find, and then I target it to that. So I hope that answers your question. I hope it helps. And keep them coming because we really do enjoy them. 707-395-7378 is the phone number to call if you've got a question or you want to, or just go to the website and shoot us an email, and we try to respond to every email that we get. Now on to our top the show. I got a letter from forwarded to me from one of the listeners. Thank you so much for that, for keeping us up to date what's going on. You guys are the greatest audience in the world. I mean, you guys are talented. You know what you're doing. You know what you're dealing with. And what we need to do on this podcast is give those people who don't have a voice. And so we want to be able to impact the industry in a way that makes change happen, but positive change. In other words, if legislation is the issue, which we have to deal with, and a lot of this, and then bring that to the attention of everybody who can listen and give a voice to the voiceless. So thank you for that. We're looking at second-generation rodenticides that are under attack. The warfarins and all that, for us, pretty much is gone. We're not using it unless you have a specific situation. For general stuff, we're getting the contract. We're using the final blocks. And those are all second-generation rodenticides. And what's happening is that it's under attack. But why? And the letter pretty much stated about the products that are being encouraged to use. And the letter from it's from the British Pest Control Association, sent it to their government, basically asking them not to remove the second generation rodenticides because they're up for, I think in 2017 from a 2008 progression in Europe and in the UK. And what we're looking at is we're dealing with the same thing basically in California. And why? Well, when you and I, as a pest control operator for general household pests and structural pests and commercial pest control, when we think of products, most of us are really careful, especially when it comes to rodenticides. I know there's some people out there that just don't care. But most of us who, especially if you're listening to this type of podcast, you care to do the right thing. And you're not going to throw a rodenticide in the middle of a landscape because the customer doesn't want to pay for rodent stations. In the state of Florida and many other places, you have to have either the rodent station attached to the floor, and you have to, or it has to have a weight on it, or an internal weight, something that keeps a little child from, or a small pet from being able to tip that over and get the rodenticide out. The trap is going to keep other animals like cats and raccoons and stuff from being able to get in there and get that bait out. And most of us are doing the right thing. I do walk around in a lot of places still, and I'll find loose rodenticide packs, like in a storage facility. The management is actually doing their own rodenticide work in the building. And they're just taking the rodenticide and putting one rodenticide pack in each storage room. I got a big problem with that because it says keep out of reach of children. So what happens when a child, you're moving your stuff, your kid sits on the floor, like mine, I got to be on top of him, 24/7. He's 2 years old. Everything he finds on the floor, he wants to put in his mouth. And he sits there in a corner and pops open that bag thinking it's Pop Rocks and starts eating the rodenticide. I think there's a huge problem with that kind of mentality, just throwing. When a customer takes, blocks vinyl, because he can buy it online, and he takes it and he throws it underneath the crawl space, and it's not even sealed. And the cat can get down there, and the neighbor's dog can get through the fence or whatever. A child can crawl in under there and eat the rodenticide, or even worse, you get a raccoon that dies under there, and then you're dealing with the smell. People throwing it in their attics because they don't want to put traps. Those are the things that I applaud the government for, the steps that they took in removing rodenticides from over the counter and allowing people to buy them. There's still some manufacturers fought it. A lot of people fought it. But, sometimes it just lets me see, when you fight something like that you see homeowners who have no training in what a rodenticide does. They have no idea what an anticoagulant is or a neurotoxin. There's no knowledge. Second, they just don't care about the environment and just throw it out there. They misuse it, misapply it. And then when something happens, oh my God, what happened? The outcry. It's always that way. So we have to go at licensing. We got to get training. We got to get certification. We got to carry insurance. And somebody can go over the counter, buy the same product, misuse it, misapply it, overdose it, and there's no consequences unless something happens. And manufacturers are fighting it, and I'm asking why. Why are you fighting? Because your sales are going to go down. That's the bottom line. So you really don't care about people's safety, and you don't care about the environment. You care about your sales. And there's some that fought it, and they're not going to, the government had to withdraw their registration for the product because they wouldn't voluntarily do it. And so those are the people that are actually doing it wrong, and they don't care. They don't understand. The homeowner. When I walk into I'm looking at a building, and the cases are all turned over. There's no weights on them. The law, how far back did that law go into effect? And there are people still pest control operators, who don't put weighted stations down. They just use the same old stations and put them outside. They don't care. I've seen rodent stations where I've opened them up when I'm going to go do an inspection on a building, and the bait hasn't been replaced. They've just been dumping more bait to the point where the bait is spilling over the side. I've got pictures of it, and they don't care. And those are the people that put us in the spotlight like we're morons. But the biggest problem is not the CPO. Is not the pest control technician. Is not the biggest problem with rodenticides goes back to, this is what you need to know. Goes back to agriculture. The biggest consumer of rodenticides is agriculture. About 90%. Not commercial. Not residential. When you tell a customer you got to spend, $100 in stations, and it's going to cost you, if you don't have a pest control service, I got to make a trip out here. It's going to cost you $65 every 2 months to monitor those stations, replace the bait. They're like, no way, I'll go do it myself. And then go buy those little ones that they got to throw away now that you can't refill. And then why are they still selling the little blocks in packets? I think it's ridiculous. You either take it all off the market or put it in ready-to-use stations that are not removable, that the customer has to toss it out and get it by another one. He's not allowed to touch the bait or the bait packs. It shouldn't be allowed. But it's wildlife. And why wildlife? And what's the problem? When we think of that damage, we don't understand that it's when you have acres and hectares of crop that you need to protect because rodents do damage to it. You're putting out a lot of rodent bait. And here's what happens. When you are in a wooded area or you're in a cropland and there's owls, and all of a sudden a rodent dies from eating the rodent bait, then that animal comes, which is a raptor animal or a scavenger animal, and eats it. They get contaminated with the bait by eating the animal. Happens to mountain lions. So all of a sudden a raccoon eats it, and here comes a mountain lion and eats the raccoon, and they get contaminated by the bait. And this is where the big problem is. It's not whether it's your pet or your children that are at risk. It's all the wildlife that they're finding the toxins in these wildlife, and it's affecting them because it's agriculture. And I think there needs to be a separate treatment for what's available for wildlife to use, for agriculture to use in rodenticide, and what is allowed in commercial, because it's totally different. We're not impacting the environment. We're not making that big of an impact on the environment by not doing this. And we're getting lumped in together with them. And they have to do it because they got to protect those crops. And I understand it. So what was the solution for Britain to do? Everyone that wants to apply, there is no over-the-counter rodenticides available for over-the-counter, period. Second of all, if you're a farm owner and you want to apply a rodenticide, you got to take a course, like a regular control operator. And you got to know how to apply those rodenticides. You just can't throw it out in your cropland. And once you get your certificate, then you can apply and buy the product. If not, you got to hire a certified operator that has taken the additional certification required for rodenticides. And you know what? I have absolutely no problem with that. I know people are going to throw their hands in the air and say, it just puts additional regulation and it's going to raise our prices. Really, one farmer, maybe with 10 hands, that have to go take a course. They can even do it online because the course is available online. Does it really put that much of a demand on you to know what you're doing and why you're handling that chemical that can potentially kill somebody? Because a lot of the rodenticides, there's no anticoagulant for them. So if a child eats it, an animal eats it, there's no rescuing them. That's the problem. And that's my question. So California is looking at following this. And they're watching what's happening. And they're going to look at it. Are they getting results? But I think that if you're a farm owner, you shouldn't just be able to go buy a rodenticide, throw it out on your cropland, or do whatever it is you do without knowing what it is that you're doing. You should be held to the same standard that any professional is held to when he has to apply these products. That's my point. And I think that's what we need to look at. So, look at I got a bunch of links on rodenticide fact sheets from California, living with wildlife and rodenticides. And I understand. Look, California's got a tremendous amount of wildlife living together with residents. I mean, your mountain lions are coming down to where residents live. Bears are coming down to where residents live. All kinds of animals. But the majority is agriculture. And I think there needs to be a separation. I think that the associations need to say, wait a minute, let's have a separate law. One for agriculture and one for commercial application. You shouldn't be allowed now, because here's the other problem. If you're a resident, you can buy it online. You don't have to. I mean, they banned it in stores. Big deal. You can go online to 2 major suppliers online, buy them, and still apply them. And you can buy it in bulk, which is much scarier, to have a bucket of rodenticide bait sitting in your garage where your kid can pop it open, or, somebody can pop that open and just, oh, look, we can play with this. That's really scary. And so, that's where we need to go as an industry. I think we need to, one is make distinction is it agriculture or is it commercial that's doing it? Is it residential? Because we've already, I have a podcast that we did, Yo and Ate Us. You go back and listen to that. Where, 90% of the product applied, 95% is applied to agriculture. The other part, 8-10%, is done by homeowners. And less than 1% of the chemical is applied by pest control operators. Why are we taking the rap and still being quiet about this when it's not us doing it? And it's not an issue of pointing fingers or putting the blame. It's not a criticism, it's an observation. This is where we're at. And I think we need to stand up and we need to point these things out and say, look, unless you take a training course, Mr. Resident, unless you take a class, you're not allowed to do your own pest control with certain of these products because you're going to kill somebody. And that's fine. Once that happens, people are going to look and say, it's not really worth it. I'll just hire somebody to do it. So guys, I hope this helps. I hope you guys, there's a ton of links here, guys. I've got on this page, I'm going to have about 20 links. So you're going to be doing some serious reading if you want to get informed. I've done all the legwork for you. Now all you have to do is consume what I've dished out. So, hey, thanks for listening, guys. It's been real. I've had a blast. I'm having a blast. It's one of those things in life when you finally find in your life what you were created to do, what you're good at, what you enjoy doing, and you get up every day and do that. And I think that's probably the most rewarding thing in my life, that I get to get up every day and actually do what I want to do. So I hope you do the same. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting PestGeekPodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.